Hello and welcome to this video about food and D&D. Today we're going to be talking about my personal history of that and my recollections of all the big events that happened with D&D and food. Obviously, it probably would be something like listening to Dodger Dex Bonus talking about like the chili story where she made chili for one of her D&D groups or something like that. But I think the earliest recollection, the one that sticks out when I was a very, very young person, probably like 11 or 12 or somewhere around there, was Spellfire, Ed Greenwood's book. And this possibly was the perfect introduction to a fantasy world. I've not read this book since I was a very, very young teenager. So we're talking about probably 20 years. And I still remember the description. It was in Myth Dranor, and the main character had found a bunch of adventurers that were fighting some devils. So they died, and while the devils were finishing them off, the main character of this book, and again, I might be getting this completely wrong, but this is how I remember it in my head. Again, I did not go back and read this book. I'm not sure I even own this book. I know I own the sequel. But I didn't go back to read this. This is from 20 years ago that I'm remembering this. So she's desperate for supplies. So she goes and grabs the pack off this adventurer who died horribly and runs away. And later is going through the pack and just going all the supplies. She's hungry. She's starving. And she finds a bunch of stuff, including two little sealed things of cheese that are sealed in wax, and one of them has been broken open already, and so she just immediately sees that there's mold and stuff on it, but that doesn't stop her. She just cuts off the mold and just starts just eating the cheese and stuff, and you know, it was such an evocative piece of literature. It was great. So that always stuck in my head, and I think that's really one of the key moments that you know, kind of said like, oh, this is what is cool about fantasy. It can be grounded in reality. You know, Ed Greenwood is amazing. I have two of his Forgotten Realms books here. This one, I believe, is one of the newer ones. This is the 4.0, 5.0 version. This has a whole section about food in the Forgotten Realms. And the little story where he talks about how back in the day, he started... Think about Delicious in Dungeon. And then back in 1978, Greenwood's players had run into a situation where the characters' horses and mules and all their packed food were swooped up and stolen by wyverns. And so the players immediately did some improv and said, we're not going back. We need to go forward, so we're going to hunt these monsters and start eating them. Just so we can keep on going and not have to go back and get supplies. And he says, we can do that, right? I mean, they're edible. They have to be edible, right? So yeah, he has these some recipes for roasted cockatrice and baked sturge on toast, which I don't know if this is the scans of the original typed out thing, but it is just hilarious. And it's just hilarious that people are like so obsessed with Delicious in Dungeon, and Ed Greenwood was doing that back in 1978. But yeah, Forgotten Realms is the 3rd edition version, I believe. And yeah, he had a whole segment where he talked about how he used to he did an article in the Dragon magazine where the conceit is that the characters from various books would they would travel through portals to his kitchen to for whatever reason to talk and stuff. And so there'd be all these powerful spellcasters and magic users in his kitchen, and he would be hiding in a suit of armor. And I just thought that was hilarious because they always commented on the food that he had. And he actually replied to one of my tweets, where he basically said, I replied to him. I basically was talking about, it's like, hey, I can't believe those wizards complimented your leftovers when they met in your house to trade spells. You must be a good cook. And then he actually responded to this, and he said, I've always looked at it more of telling us a lot about what they usually got to eat, meaning like these guys were from a dimension or area where the food really wasn't as good, because that's not the main focus of like what was going on there. So like to be able to eat lasagna in our world is like a real treat for them. So I always thought that was fascinating. Moving much far further, of course, we have Warhammer 2nd Edition, and this amazing illustration of the cheap pie. This comes from I believe, the Old World Armory. Amazing little illustration there. These are just normal citizens, but with a simple picture, you can tell so much about what's happening in the setting of the old world in this picture. The people live with death, and thus they are decorated with skulls, and wheeling and dealing over a cheap pie is just everyday stuff that happens. And the rules that this game had with trading and stuff, it's so great. It's why I always kind of focus on supplies and food and survival, because what good is a amazing sword going to do you if you don't have any food out in the wilds, you know? The next thing, of course, is my pamphlet. Yes, that's right. So the section with magical foodstuffs includes the Dwarven Battle Bread, definitely one of my favorite items that I've come up with over the years. Very useful, very interesting, not very overpowered. There are overpowered items in this book, but I think the Dwarven Battle Bread is just a fun one to have there in case anybody needs a makeshift magic weapon. It's just a fun thing to include into the game. And of course, the D&D cookbook. Oh my god, what a fun cookbook this is. I did a couple of videos on this. This was such a great little introductory cookbook. I'm still learning to cook, and I think this definitely had some excellent recipes that are both simple and delicious to try out. Yeah, I think we all kind of know why I'm doing this. I'm doing this video because of this image here. You've probably all seen it by now. It is from the brand new Player's Handbook, which I just got. And I personally think that, I have minor criticisms, and then I have a deep personal criticism. So the minor criticism is that it does look a lot corporate happy nonsense. Everyone's happy, everyone's got happy expressions, and I don't know, just kind of seems like stock art of happy people eating. It really does. We already had an amazing example of how to do this correctly, and it's funny how similar these are. But yeah, you have the guy here who's obviously deep in thought. You have the dwarf with the goblin who's sharing secrets. You have the enigmatic person who's standing back here. What's going on with that? I don't know. We have the person who's obviously doing something shady in the front there. Some persons who's having a conversation. Person deep in meditation there. And a bunch of stuff is happening. And I think this is much more evocative. And so I'm not even talking about the food that they decided to include in this. But yeah, obviously, that's a little bit of criticism that I had. The other criticism that I have is definitely a personal thing, and that has to do with this little thing right here, the cheeseburger, which it's gonna sound weird, but I was a little bit depressed about this. Yeah, no, I fucked up the audio recording. Just the background on me, in my 20s, I spent a lot of my time eating a lot of cheeseburgers and hamburgers because I never learned how to cook. I don't really have any family. And I spent a lot of my time homeless. So it's tough to cook your meals when you're homeless. And I don't want to get all blubbery again, but the main point of that story is that I got invited to somebody's house for tabletop games and D&D and stuff. and they invited me into their home. They fed me what would be my first like home cooked meal that I ate in 7 years. And I was really appreciative of that, because not only did, we all had fun, we all played the game, but they thanked me for coming, and I could tell they were really appreciative of me. That was just something that I really needed. I still remember I still remember the meal exactly. One of the main things was roasted garlic lentil soup. And I honestly think that's why I'm so obsessed with like soup and cooking now. I think a lot of people who play the game really want an escape from reality, and I know the idea is that D&D can take place in any kind of world, even like a alternate reality, or you can use any kind of stuff. But I really enjoy the cover to the Heroes Feast cookbook a lot more, just because that kind of stuff like this helps me escape from reality, and I desperately needed that. And that's obviously just a real personal thing for me. And I'm sure other people have other takes on it, but I think it'd be a great idea if in the comments below you want to just talk about some of the positive things that you've had with D&D and food. It could be something within the game. Like I said, I love to implement survival stuff. I love to implement like little, special trading things and food related things in the game. I find that interesting. But if you have anything positive to say about food and D&D in the comments below, please let me know. And again, I don't want to sit here and trauma dump on this channel, but it is a positive thing. And like I said, it's something I really needed back then. And it's one of the reasons why I'm still interested in board games today. And that's just my story.